Dr. Alina Voss wiped the dust from her brow, staring at the strange object half buried in the sands of Egypt. It was a fragment, but not just any fragment. This piece of what appeared to be a broken relic seemed to hum with an energy she could feel even through her gloves. She knelt down, her heart racing, as the early morning sun cast a warm glow over the excavation site. Her team had spent weeks digging through this ancient ruin on the outskirts of Cairo, convinced they had found something extraordinary. But this was beyond her wildest expectations. The relic, a shard of translucent black crystal, pulsed softly in her hand. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a broken piece of some long-forgotten artifact. But upon closer inspection, symbols carved into its surface seemed to shift and change as though alive. Alina's mind raced. The legends she had read about, a relic lost to time, with the power to reshape worlds. The Valthar shard. "Alina, you need to see this," called out one of her assistants, a young archaeologist named Tobias. He was standing at the edge of the dig, pointing frantically at something on his tablet. Alina's heart skipped. She had a bad feeling about this. "I'll be right there," she called back, unwilling to take her eyes off the relic. The shard felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of history itself. The ancient markings were impossible to ignore now. She could feel the power radiating from it, something immense, something beyond human comprehension. As she carefully placed it into a secure case, the ground beneath her shifted slightly, and a faint hum echoed through the air. Alina froze. The relic wasn't just powerful, it was awake. When she reached Tobias, his face was pale. "The scan's picking up something strange," he said, showing her his tablet. The usual archaeological data was overwritten by something far more complex. "It's transmitting something, a signal." Alina's stomach sank. She had been expecting ancient relics, artifacts of the past, but this was something else entirely, something far more dangerous. "We need to get this back to the lab now," Alina said, her voice urgent. "This isn't just a historical discovery, it's something alive." But as the team began packing up to leave, the first sign of danger appeared. A low hum filled the air, and a strange vibration rippled through the ground. The hair on the back of Alina's neck stood up. The hairspray mist she had used to preserve the fragile relic earlier seemed to shimmer in the air like a mirage. Then, a sudden explosion of dust and debris erupted in the distance. Alina's heart skipped a beat. "No, no, it can't be," she whispered. From the cloud of dust, figures emerged, alien soldiers, their faces obscured by sleek helmets, and their bodies clad in dark, armored suits. Their weapons were unlike anything she had seen, energy pulsing from them as they leveled their guns directly at Alina and her team. There was no warning, no attempt to communicate, just an immediate and unmistakable threat. "Alina, we need to run," Tobias shouted, grabbing her arm, but it was too late. One of the aliens stepped forward, its voice harsh and guttural as it spoke in a language Alina couldn't understand. Then, the ground shook beneath their feet, and the aliens fired a warning shot into the sand. The message was clear, the relic was theirs. Alina's mind raced. The Dominion had arrived. The ancient alien empire, long whispered about in galactic rumors, was real, and they were here for the relic. And there was no way they would let Earth stand in their way. The team scattered in every direction, but Alina stayed behind, clutching the shard. If she could get to the excavation vehicle, they might just have a chance to escape. But the alien forces were closing in, and the reality of what she had just unearthed sank in. The Valthar shard wasn't just a relic, it was the key to something far greater. Something that would change the fate of Earth forever. In that moment, Alina realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The dust cloud from the explosion still hung thick in the air as Alina sprinted toward the vehicle. Her heart was pounding in her chest, adrenaline fueling every step. Behind her, she could hear the unmistakable click of alien soldiers advancing, their heavy boots crunching in the sand, echoing across the desert like the ticking of a death clock. Her team was scattering, but they were not prepared for this. None of them were. "Elena, hurry!" Tobias shouted, his voice tight with fear. He had already reached the vehicle and was frantically waving her forward. But Elena couldn't tear her eyes away from the group of aliens slowly surrounding them. They were disciplined, organized, and deadly. It wasn't just the weapons they carried, it was the sheer presence they exuded. They were no ordinary invaders. These soldiers had seen countless worlds fall. Elena's hand tightened around the relic, still safely secured in the case. The artifact felt heavier now, as though responding to the danger around them. She couldn't understand why, but the shard seemed to pulse with an urgency, as though it knew something she didn't, something it needed. Suddenly, a sharp, high-pitched whine cut through the air, and a blinding flash of light exploded from the center of the alien formation. Elena froze. The ground beneath her feet trembled violently, sending her to the ground. A guttural command in the alien tongue came from one of the soldiers. The air crackled with energy. A force field was being deployed, enclosing the entire team in a dome of shimmering, impenetrable light. Tobias's voice cracked with panic. "Elena, they've got us trapped." She scrambled to her feet, the weight of the relic feeling like an anchor. "Stay calm, Tobias," she said, forcing her voice to steady. "We'll get out of this. Just stick with me." The alien soldiers moved with terrifying precision, flanking every possible escape route. Elena felt a surge of cold dread as she realized that they weren't just here to capture the relic. They were here to annihilate anyone who stood in their way. Before she could say anything else, the air around them seemed to ripple, and a tall figure in a sleek, dark uniform stepped forward from the alien ranks. This one wasn't like the others. His armor was more ornate, and his presence was imposing, his posture regal. He was their leader. "Elena Voss," he spoke, his voice smooth, though laced with a cold edge. "I am Lord Zephyros of the Xalan Dominion. You have no idea what you have just uncovered." Elena's blood ran cold. She had heard of the Xalan Dominion, its ruthless expansion, its unyielding control over countless star systems. But hearing it spoken aloud, seeing the terrifying reality of their leader standing before her, sent a shiver of dread down her spine. "We know what you seek," she replied, her voice defiant despite the fear gnawing at her. "You want the relic." Lord Zephyros didn't smile. His expression remained unchanged, unreadable. "The relic, yes, but not just for its power. We seek to reunite the fragments, to wield its full potential. With it, I will reshape the universe under the Dominion's rule, and you, Dr. Voss, will help me achieve that." Elena's mind raced. There was no way she would ever help these creatures. The Dominion's conquest of countless worlds, their brutal reign, it all came crashing into her thoughts. She couldn't allow them to control the relic, to reshape the galaxy in their image. "The relic isn't meant for destruction," she said, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. "It was a tool of peace, created to balance the forces of the universe, not control them." Lord Zephyros' eyes narrowed. "You believe this relic has noble intentions? You're naive, Dr. Voss. The relic was never meant for peace. It was a weapon, and it will be wielded as such." Before Elena could respond, one of the soldiers moved quickly toward her, grabbing the case with the shard. Her heart skipped a beat as the soldier pulled it away from her grasp, and for a split second, Elena could swear the relic pulsed, its energy flaring in response to the touch. "You cannot understand its true power," Lord Zephyros continued, his tone dark. "But you will, soon enough." Elena's stomach twisted as the realization hit her. The Dominion wasn't just after the relic. They were after everything it could unlock, everything it could bring. The galaxy was on the brink of something far worse than mere conquest. As the soldiers began to move in, preparing to take her and her team captive, Elena made a split-second decision. She had to escape. They had to escape. "Run!" she screamed at Tobias, her voice raw. "Get to the transport, now!" Tobias hesitated, then turned and bolted toward the vehicle. The others followed, but it was clear they couldn't outrun the Dominion's forces, not without a miracle. And yet, as they ran, Elena knew there was no going back. Earth had just entered a war far beyond anything it had ever imagined. The Axalan Dominion had found them, and they would stop at nothing to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The transport's engines roared to life, sending a cloud of sand billowing around the tires as Elena and her team rushed inside. The air was thick with panic, their breaths sharp and ragged. As Tobias slammed the door shut, Elena's mind raced. They had escaped the alien forces, for now, but their victory felt hollow. The Relic, now secured in the back compartment of the transport, pulsed ominously. What had they unleashed? "Where are we going, Elena?" Tobias asked, his voice trembling. "Where can we go?" Elena sat heavily in the driver's seat, staring out into the endless stretch of desert. "We need to get back to Cairo," she said, though the words felt inadequate. "We need to make sure the Relic doesn't fall into their hands." The air inside the transport was thick with tension. They had no plan, no time to strategize. The Dominion had already proven they could track them, and Earth's defenses weren't ready for this kind of threat. Elena knew she couldn't trust Earth alone to handle the situation. If the Dominion could strike so easily, it meant they had already infiltrated Earth's political structure far deeper than anyone realized. "We're not safe," she muttered to herself, flicking switches and hitting buttons to begin the long, bumpy trek back to the city. The sound of a radio crackled in her ear, the distorted voice of Captain Rojas cutting through the static. "Elena, this is Captain Rojas," the voice barked through the comm. "We've got reports of unusual activity near the outskirts of Cairo. The Dominion forces are already on their way. The moment you land, we need to move fast. No delays." Elena's heart sank. The enemy was closer than they thought. "Understood, Captain. We're on our way." As the transport sped across the desert, Elena's mind was on the bigger picture. The Axalan Dominion was not just interested in the Relic. They were searching for all its fragments, scattered across the galaxy. She had already deciphered part of the map etched into the shard, a set of coordinates leading to distant star systems, but she was unsure of the implications. The map spoke of more pieces that, when united, could unlock unimaginable power. But who would be left to stop the Dominion once they wielded it? "Elena," Tobias said quietly, pulling her from her thoughts. "What happens if they get all of it, if they combine the Relic?" Elena didn't respond immediately. The thought was enough to chill her blood. "I don't know, but we can't let them." Her voice was firm, even though doubt gnawed at her every word. The Relic could do more than reshape the galaxy. It could rewrite history itself, and Earth would be at the mercy of whatever designs the Dominion had for it. The transport hit the outskirts of Cairo, the skyline rising in the distance, but it was far from a safe haven. A series of flashes lit up the sky in the distance. Lasers, high-energy blasts, the unmistakable signature of alien weaponry. Elena cursed under her breath. The Dominion had already begun their invasion. The transport bounced over the uneven terrain, rattling violently. Elena's knuckles were white on the wheel. They were almost there, but their escape would be meaningless if the alien forces were waiting at the city's gates. "Rojas, we need immediate extraction," Elena said into the comms. "The Dominion's already here. The city is in danger." There was a brief pause before Rojas replied, his voice urgent. "Get to the underground base as quickly as you can. We'll hold them off as long as we can, but you need to bring the Relic to safety. This is bigger than any of us. Don't let them have it." The transport screeched to a halt in a hidden alleyway in the heart of Cairo. The underground base was their last hope, a hidden sanctuary designed to protect humanity's most precious assets in case of a global catastrophe. As the team disembarked, Elena's eyes flicked nervously to the horizon. There were no signs of Dominion ships in the sky yet, but it was only a matter of time. "We have to move fast," Elena said, grabbing the case with the relic. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at it again. This was just the beginning. The Dominion wasn't going to stop at Earth. If they united the relic's fragments, there was no telling what kind of power they would possess. Tobias followed her, glancing over his shoulder at the chaos unfolding outside. "Do you think we can stop them?" Elena's eyes hardened as she watched the first wave of Zellan ships appear over the horizon. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice resolute. "We'll fight. We have to, or the galaxy will fall." With that, they plunged deeper into the hidden tunnels of the underground base. The air smelled of dust and old concrete, but for the first time since the excavation, Elena felt a small flicker of hope. They weren't alone in this fight. They had allies, people who would not bow to the Dominion. And if they could find the remaining relic pieces before the aliens did, maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. But time was running out. The war for the galaxy had already begun. The underground base was eerily quiet as Elena and her team descended deeper into its labyrinthine corridors. The air was cool, but thick with the sense of urgency. The base, originally built as a precautionary measure during the early years of the space race, had been expanded and fortified over the decades, its existence known only to the highest echelons of Earth's government. A hidden sanctuary, it was the last line of defense against threats from beyond the stars. But now, Elena wondered if even this secretive stronghold would be enough to protect them. She glanced over at Tobias, who was walking a few steps behind, his face pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. His hand gripped the case with the Valthar shard, his fingers white-knuckled. Elena's thoughts kept returning to that relic. What had they truly uncovered? It wasn't just an artifact. It was a symbol of something ancient, something powerful enough to reshape the galaxy. And now the Dominion was closing in. They reached the secured control room, where a group of military officers and scientists awaited them. Captain Rojas stood at the forefront, his face grim but determined. He was flanked by two high-ranking officers, General Salas and Dr. Javier Ran, both veterans of the Space Defense Program. Elena couldn't help but feel a flicker of relief. They were here ready to fight. "Dr. Voss," Rojas greeted her. "I assume you have the relic?" Elena nodded, setting the case down on a nearby table. "It's all we could recover, but we don't know if it's complete, and we have no idea what it's capable of." Her voice was tight with frustration. "The Dominion is already in the city, and they're not just after the relic. They want everything." Rojas exchanged a glance with General Solis, who spoke up, his tone clipped. "We've intercepted communications suggesting the Dominion plans to launch an all-out assault on Earth's defenses. They believe the relic will lead them to other fragments hidden in this galaxy." "And once they have them all?" Elena asked. "We don't want to find out," Rojas replied bluntly. "But from what we've gathered, the Dominion's leader, Lord Zephyros, intends to use the relic to reunite all the fragments and activate the weapon inside. If he succeeds, we'll be facing an unstoppable force." Elena's mind raced. The implications were staggering. A weapon that could reshape the universe, not just conquer it. The Dominion had no qualms about wiping out entire worlds to impose their will. She couldn't let that happen. "We need to locate the other fragments," Elena said firmly, "before they do." Dr. Wren, a brilliant scientist specializing in ancient alien technology, stepped forward. "We've been trying to decipher the map etched into the shard, but it's unlike anything we've encountered before. The symbols shift, change. It's almost as if the map itself is alive, guiding us to the next piece." Tobias stepped up beside Elena, his brow furrowed. "And how do we find it? How can we trust that this map will even lead us to the right place?" "We don't have a choice," Elena answered. "The Dominion will be able to track us if we don't move quickly, and we won't have time to prepare another plan." She paused, meeting Roja's eyes. We need a team to go after the next fragment. They won't stop until they have it all. Rojas nodded grimly. We'll move out at once. General Solis, prepare the ground forces. Dr. Wren, you're with me. We'll secure the necessary resources and backup for the team. Elena turned to Tobias, her voice low but urgent. You're coming with me. We can't risk anyone else being captured or killed. Tobias swallowed, his nervousness obvious, but he nodded. Right, I'm with you. As the planning continued, Elena stepped away from the table, her gaze lingering on the shard. She felt an odd connection to it, as if it were calling to her, urging her to unlock its secrets. But she couldn't afford to be distracted. Every moment they wasted brought them closer to disaster. The Dominion would not wait. They never did. Just as the group was finalizing their plans, the base trembled, a deep vibration rattling through the walls. Alarms began blaring, and red lights flashed, casting everything in a harsh, ominous glow. The ground shook again, harder this time. A rumbling sound grew louder, accompanied by the distant roar of engines. Elena, we've got company, General Solis said, his voice tight with urgency. The Dominion's forces are here. They've tracked us. Elena's stomach dropped. How long do we have? Minutes, Rojas replied. We have to move now. Without a second thought, Elena grabbed the shard and turned toward the exit. They couldn't afford to waste time. Every second counted. As they moved through the corridors of the base, a feeling of dread settled over her. The Dominion had found them, and they were going to do everything in their power to take the relic and prevent Earth from ever becoming a threat. The fight for the galaxy was only just beginning, but no matter what happened, Elena knew one thing: she couldn't let the Dominion win. Not now, not ever. The fate of everything rested on this fragile moment. The underground base was chaos as alarms blared throughout the facility. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted through the narrow corridors, the weight of the relic pressing heavily in her hands. She could hear the sounds of boots pounding behind them, the sharp, mechanical clanks of Dominion soldiers closing in. The walls shook with the growing vibrations from outside, and the air smelled faintly of burning circuits and ozone. They didn't have much time. Keep moving, Captain Rojas shouted, leading the way toward the base's emergency exit. We've got a window, but it won't last long. The Dominion will be on us any second. Elena nodded, gritting her teeth as she followed Rojas, Tobias close behind her. The map etched into the shard had led them here, an isolated outpost where another fragment of the relic was believed to be hidden. If they didn't reach it before the Dominion, Earth's last hope would vanish. The air was thick with the scent of dust and urgency, and Elena's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. As they reached the exit, Elena glanced over her shoulder, watching the dim glow of the base's emergency lights flicker in the distance. She knew that if the Dominion broke through, there would be no turning back. The base was the last bastion of Earth's defenses, and it wouldn't stand against the Salon Dominion's full force. The team emerged into the cold night air, where the rumbling sounds of massive engines reverberated in the distance. In the sky above them, silhouettes of ships, the unmistakable form of Dominion warships, sliced through the darkness. Their sleek, angular shapes sent a chill down Elena's spine. They were already here. They were hunting them. A military transport vehicle was waiting at the edge of the base's perimeter, engines idling and ready for takeoff. General Solis and Dr. Wren were already aboard, with the rest of the team scrambling into position. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized how close they were to disaster. They couldn't afford to be slow, couldn't afford any mistakes. "Let's go," Rojas shouted, slamming the door shut once everyone was inside. The transport's engines roared to life, and they shot into the air, dodging through the darkened skies of Cairo. Elena looked out the window, her eyes scanning the skyline. The lights of the city blinked below, but in the distance, a massive fleet of Zallan warships was descending like vultures, their weapon systems powering up. She could see the glow of plasma cannons charging, hear the faint hum of energy shields forming around the ships. They weren't just attacking the base, they were attacking the entire city. Elena, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Rojas barked as the transport swerved, narrowly dodging a barrage of plasma fire from above. The force of the blast rocked the vehicle, sending Elena and the others sprawling. She gritted her teeth as the ship dipped and spun, barely staying in the air as the SLN forces closed in. "We need to get to the ground," General Solis ordered, gripping the sides of his seat. "The fragment's location is underground. This will be the perfect cover." "Elena, we're coming in hot," Rojas shouted. "Ready yourself." Elena nodded, securing the case with the shard and bracing herself. The transport dove toward a rocky outcrop near the coordinates, kicking up dust and debris as it hit the ground hard. The engines sputtered, grinding to a halt as the ship bounced once, then skidded across the barren landscape. A sharp metal screech filled the air. "Everyone out now," Rojas yelled, throwing open the hatch. The door slammed to the ground with a heavy thud, and the team rushed out into the cold desert night, weapons drawn and ready for anything. Elena's eyes darted to the horizon. The Dominion ships were still visible in the sky, their lasers flashing down on the terrain below. Time was running out. "Elena, we don't have much time," Tobias shouted, tugging at her sleeve. "They'll be on us in minutes." "I know," Elena said, her voice tight with determination. "But we have a mission. The fragment is down there." She pointed toward the rocky outcrop, where a narrow passageway was partially hidden by crumbling stone and sand. "That's our way in." The team quickly made their way toward the entrance, moving swiftly but cautiously. Every step brought them closer to the unknown, and the fear that the Dominion could be just behind them. As they descended into the dark tunnel, Elena's mind raced. The further they went, the closer they came to finding the Relic's fragment. But she could feel the weight of the decision they had made, the immense responsibility of what they were about to unleash. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and they had no idea whether the path ahead would lead to salvation or destruction. But there was no turning back. Not now. The air inside the tunnel was musty and thick with the smell of ancient stone. The narrow passageway twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth. Elena's breath echoed in the silence, the only sound the soft patter of their footsteps and the occasional scrape of armor against the rocky walls. The flickering lights of their handheld torches cast long shadows, dancing on the uneven surfaces, making the passage feel even more claustrophobic. Tobias moved quietly beside her, his face pale in the dim light, his eyes darting nervously to every corner. "You sure this is the right place?" he whispered, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "This is it," Elena replied, her tone steady, though her own nerves were starting to fray. The coordinates had led them here, deep beneath the surface, where a long-forgotten alien structure lay buried in the rock. The Relic's fragment was supposed to be hidden in a chamber just ahead, but everything felt wrong. The air was charged with something older, something far more ancient than the Dominion or even humanity itself. General Solis, who was leading the way, stopped abruptly. He motioned for the team to be quiet. His gaze swept the tunnel ahead. "Something's not right," he muttered. "This place feels off." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She had felt it too, the subtle hum in the air, like a low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate deep within her bones. There was something alive in the depths, something that had been waiting for them. "I don't like this," Tobias murmured, his hand twitching near his weapon. "We should turn back." "No," Elena's voice was sharp, though she kept her fears in check. "We can't. The fragment is close. It's our only shot at stopping the Dominion." General Solis nodded, his face hardening. "We'll keep moving, but stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with down here." The team pressed on, moving with more caution now, every step taken in silence. The tunnel narrowed further as they descended, and the air grew colder. The walls began to change, the jagged rock giving way to smooth, polished surfaces, metal that shimmered in the torchlight. Alien hieroglyphs, glowing faintly, covered the walls in intricate patterns. Elena's fingers traced the symbols as they passed, the designs alien but strangely familiar. "This is it," Dr. Wren said, his voice full of awe. "This is Ixalan ruin. They must have built it millennia ago." Elena's eyes narrowed as she examined the symbols. "What does it mean?" Dr. Wren hesitated. "The symbols, they refer to a vault, a place where the Dominion stored their greatest artifacts, their most powerful weapons." His voice trembled. "If this is what I think it is, then the relic here, it's not just a fragment. It's something more." A cold shiver ran down Elena's spine. "More?" she repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. What could be more dangerous than the relic they already had? "We need to move faster," General Solis urged. "We don't know how much time we have." The group pressed on, their pace quickening as they approached the end of the tunnel. A massive door, unlike any they had ever seen, loomed before them. It was a seamless slab of dark metal, covered in the same glowing symbols that adorned the tunnel walls. The door seemed to pulse with energy, an ancient power surging through it like a heartbeat. "This is it," Elena said, stepping forward. Her heart was racing now, her palms sweaty. The chamber beyond was supposed to hold the next piece of the relic, but this door felt different. It felt alive. She could almost sense it, the power that radiated from beyond the metal. "How do we open it?" Tobias asked, his voice a whisper. He reached for the door, his fingers hovering just above the smooth surface. Dr. Wren stepped forward, his eyes alight with fascination. "We need to decode the symbols. It's a security mechanism." He knelt before the door, tracing his fingers over the glowing hieroglyphs. I think we need to activate them in a certain order." Elena's eyes locked onto the door, her mind racing. What happens if we get it wrong? "There's no telling," Dr. Wren said, his voice tight. "But we don't have time to hesitate. If we don't open it, the Dominion will get here before we do." Elena nodded. "Then let's take our chances." Dr. Wren's fingers moved swiftly, touching the symbols one by one. The air in the tunnel seemed to shift, the temperature dropping sharply as the energy from the door surged, making the walls tremble. A low hum began to vibrate through the ground, growing louder with each passing second. Elena felt it in her chest, like a pressure building, a warning. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and the door groaned, its ancient mechanisms grinding into motion. It began to open, slowly, inch by inch, revealing the dark chamber within. And then, as the door finally swung wide, a wave of force hit them, knocking them all back. Elena's heart skipped as she looked into the chamber. Inside, resting on a pedestal in the center of the room, was another piece of the relic, a massive crystal, radiating with an eerie, pulsating glow. The very air around it seemed to warp and shimmer, as if the relic itself were bending the laws of reality. But there was something else. A shadow loomed in the back of the chamber, something large, something ancient. It stirred, awakening. And Elena realized, with a sinking feeling, that they were not alone. Elena's breath caught in her throat as the chamber's oppressive silence was shattered by a low guttural growl. Her heart raced as she took a step back, her eyes scanning the shadows, searching for the source of the sound. The flickering light from their torches illuminated only part of the chamber, leaving the rest shrouded in darkness. And that dark shape, what had moved inside the chamber, was still hidden from view, its presence felt but not yet seen. "Move," General Solis barked, snapping Elena out of her trance. "We don't know what that is, but it's a threat." Elena nodded, drawing her weapon and raising it cautiously. Her hand was steady, but her mind was in turmoil. The relic was within reach, but so was whatever had been waiting in the shadows. Was it a defense mechanism, guarding the artifact, or was it something far worse? Tobias stepped up beside her, his face pale. What the hell was that noise? I don't think we can fight whatever's in there. We won't have a choice, Elena replied, her voice tight with resolve. But we need that fragment. The glow of the relic crystal pulsed brighter, casting an eerie light across the room. It beckoned them, its radiance drawing their eyes, even as the shadows at the far end of the chamber seemed to shift. Then, with a shriek that split the air, something lunged from the dark, its form enormous and monstrous. A towering insectoid creature with jagged, razor-sharp limbs that scraped against the stone floor. Its many eyes glowed an unnatural green, and its exoskeleton gleamed like polished black metal. It hissed, a low, menacing sound that echoed through the chamber before it pounced toward them. "Take cover," Solace shouted, but it was already too late. The creature was upon them in a flash, moving faster than any of them could react. Elena dove to the side, rolling behind a stone pillar just as the creature's sharp claws raked through the air where she had been standing. Tobias scrambled, his breath coming in panicked gasps as the creature's pincers clicked menacingly. It had clearly been waiting for them to arrive. "Elena!" Tobias screamed. "It's coming for us!" The creature turned its grotesque head, its eyes locking onto Tobias as it advanced. With a snarl, it lunged toward him, its claws slashing through the air. "Watch out!" Elena shouted. In a flash, she sprinted across the room, diving into the path of the creature's attack. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she pushed Tobias out of the way just in time. The creature's claws scraped against her armor, leaving deep gouges in the metal, but it missed her vital organs. Elena rolled to her feet and fired her weapon, the blasts striking the creature's exoskeleton. It screeched in fury, but barely slowed. "Focus fire on its joints," General Solace ordered, his own weapon aimed at the creature's legs. "That's its weak point." The team opened fire, their weapons roaring as they targeted the creature's massive legs. Each shot seemed to have little effect, but they continued to press the attack, unwilling to give up. The creature swiveled, clearly annoyed, and struck back with a massive sweep of its claws. Elena ducked, narrowly avoiding the attack. The chamber's stone floor cracked under the force of its strike, dust and debris flying into the air. "Dr. Wren, can you help?" Elena shouted as she moved to the side to reload. "Any ideas?" Dr. Wren, who had been frantically scanning the surroundings, didn't hesitate. "There's an energy source embedded within the walls," he shouted. "If we can disable it, we might be able to turn off the creature's control systems." "Elena," Tobias shouted, his voice frantic. "We need to get out of here. It's too strong." "No," Elena snapped, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the pulsating crystal in the center of the room. The piece of the relic was still within reach, and if they could secure it, they would have the upper hand. But the creature was relentless, and their chances of survival were dwindling with each passing second. As the team continued to fire, Elena darted toward the pedestal, her legs aching from the effort. The creature saw her move and let out an unearthly roar, charging at her with terrifying speed. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted, the world around her slowing, and everything seemed to blur in a haze of red. She dove for the pedestal, her hands reaching out just as the creature's claws came crashing down toward her. Time seemed to stretch, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the crystal activated. A shockwave of energy exploded from the crystal, knocking the creature back with such force that it crashed into the far wall of the chamber, crumpling to the ground in a heap. The glow of the relic intensified, its power surging as the chamber filled with light. "What the hell just happened?" Tobias gasped, wide-eyed as the creature lay motionless on the floor. Elena, trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her veins, managed to stand. "The relic, it's alive. It activated. I think it was the key to controlling the creature." General Solace glanced around, his face hardening. "We don't have time to figure this out. The Dominion will be here soon." But Elena was staring at the relic, her mind racing. The energy it had unleashed wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was something far more powerful, something that could change the tide of their war. They had to understand it, harness it. But first, they had to survive. The roar of engines outside echoed through the chamber, and Elena knew their fight was far from over. The hum of the relic's energy still vibrated through the chamber, the crystal's intense glow casting everything in an otherworldly light. Elena felt its power, and though it was overwhelming, there was no time to marvel at it. The Dominion was closing in. She could already hear the sound of dropships descending through the atmosphere above, their engines roaring as they neared the chamber. "We need to move," General Solis urged, his voice sharp with urgency. He was already scanning the exits, but there was no clear way out. The walls of the chamber were solid stone, with no visible pathways leading further. The only way forward was through the Dominion that would soon swarm the area. Elena stood frozen for a moment, her hand hovering over the relic. It was so much more than just a fragment now. Whatever had activated it, whatever power it contained, could turn the tide of the war. She had no doubt about that. The problem was, she had no idea how to control it. "Elena," Tobias called, snapping her back to reality. "We don't have time to figure it out. They're coming." He was right. Elena could hear the distant thrum of the Dominion ships, their engines cutting through the thick air. She could almost feel their presence, their brutality, bearing down on them. "Dr. Wren, any ideas on how we use it?" Elena called out, trying to mask the panic in her voice. Dr. Wren had been studying the crystal, his brow furrowed. He looked up, frustration and determination evident on his face. I think it's linked to the energy systems of the entire ruin. But if we try to activate it further, we risk destabilizing the entire structure." "That's a risk we'll have to take," Elena said firmly, glancing back at the creature now motionless on the ground. "If we can channel the relic's energy, maybe we can turn it into a weapon, or at least a shield." Solis nodded. "I'll hold the line as long as I can. You make it work." Elena turned back to the crystal, her hands shaking as she approached. The light pulsated almost like it was breathing, sensing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She reached out, feeling the surge of energy radiating from it. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through her fingertips. Tobias was beside her, eyes scanning the entrance nervously. "Hurry up, Elena. We don't have much." Suddenly, the chamber trembled, and Elena nearly lost her footing. The force of it was undeniable. This wasn't just an aftershock. Something massive was descending. The ground cracked, and the ceiling groaned as though the whole ruin was coming alive. "The Dominion is here," Rojas shouted, his voice grim. The rumble grew louder, the ground shaking beneath them. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, focusing all her thoughts on the relic. The energy surged within her, a crackling force that pulsed through her veins like fire. It was as though the relic was calling to her, communicating with her at a level beyond reason. She could feel its power, ancient and vast, but she also felt its unpredictability. She had no idea what would happen if she pushed it further. But there was no time left. "Here goes nothing," Elena muttered. With a deep breath, she placed both hands on the crystal's surface. The air around her seemed to freeze, and the light from the relic flared, brighter than ever. For a moment, everything went silent. The Dominion forces outside, the rumbling of the earth, the beating of her own heart, all of it ceased. And then, with a sound that could only be described as thunder, the entire chamber erupted in a blinding explosion of energy. A shockwave rippled outward, expanding like a wave through the air. The walls trembled violently, cracks appearing as the energy surged through every inch of the ruin, every piece of alien technology. The ground shook again, but this time it wasn't from the Dominion ships. The very structure of the ruin had shifted, its power turned outward like a weapon. Elena's body was nearly thrown back by the force, but she held her ground, feeling the weight of the relic's power surge through her. Her mind burned with energy, her senses heightened beyond anything she had ever experienced. And then, through the crackling energy, Alina heard it, the roar of Dominion ships coming to a halt. The pulse of energy from the Relic surged forward, toward the entrance, and the ground before them split open in a massive barrier of energy, forming a shield around the entire chamber. The Dominion ships outside seemed to slow, their weapon systems flickering, as if they had hit an invisible wall. "What the hell is that?" Tobias gasped, staring at the energy barrier that surrounded them. Alina's vision blurred, her head spinning as the power continued to course through her. She fought to keep her focus, but the Relic's power was overwhelming. The force of it was like an ocean crashing over her, threatening to drown her. "We did it," Dr. Wren whispered, wide-eyed. "We've turned it into a force field." But it wasn't just a shield, it was more. Alina could feel the Relic's power reaching out, expanding beyond their immediate vicinity, an energy field spreading across the entire ruin. She could sense the Dominion ships, their attempts to break through the barrier, but they were helpless. The Relic had activated not just as a weapon, but as a defense system that extended far beyond the walls of the chamber. For the first time, Alina felt a glimmer of hope. The war wasn't over yet, but they had just gained an enormous advantage. "Alina," General Solis called, his voice filled with urgency. "The shield won't hold forever. We need to get out of here now." She nodded, her hands still shaking as the power of the Relic ebbed, but it was enough. They had secured the fragment. They had turned the tide. But as they prepared to make their escape, Alina knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The Relic was far more than just a weapon. It was Earth's last hope. And now they had to make sure they could wield its power before the Dominion could stop them. The final stand had begun.